Hi everyone, I'm Jana, and I'll be introducing you to freshwater wetland ecosystems. This introduction is organized into 5 sections that work together to paint a broad landscape portrait of freshwater wetland ecosystems. First, I'll start out with the definition and characteristics of freshwater wetlands. Second, we'll look in more detail at a few of the key flora and fauna of this ecosystem. In the third section, I'll talk about ecological functions of freshwater wetlands. Fourth, I'll discuss threats to this ecosystem. And in section 5, we'll uncover conservation efforts. After that broad introduction, I'll focus the rest of the intro on the freshwater wetlands in the Bolivar Habitat Preserve, share other local examples of freshwater wetlands, and provide resources from readings to lesson plans for you as teachers. So, what are freshwater wetlands? Well, it's a little complicated. Wetlands are fluctuating ecosystems, so they're inherently difficult to categorize and are often found at the intersection of terrestrial habitat and aquatic habitat, and usually include elements of both systems. Many wetlands are unique to a certain degree, as their individual characteristics are determined by a combination of factors. Although the nature and properties of wetlands varies widely in Texas and worldwide, wetlands are typically defined by the presence of 3 things. Number 1, wetland hydrology. Water that's present for part or all of the year at or above the surface and within the root zone. Number 2, wetland soils. Soil characteristics that differ from surrounding uplands. And number 3, wetland vegetation. Wetlands will consist of plants that are adapted to the presence of water and generally lack plants that are intolerant of wet conditions. Hydrology is one of the most important factors that determines the overall nature of a wetland, since the timing, quantity, and duration of water flow strongly influences both abiotic and biotic factors within a wetland. Abiotic factors that are determined by hydrology in a wetland could include soil texture, water quality, or topography, whereas biotic factors influenced by hydrology in a wetland could be plant and animal types, diversity, or quantity. Most wetlands experience a fluctuating water level on a seasonal or even yearly basis, so some areas that are difficult to identify as wetlands during the summer might be completely inundated during the winter. Texas contains 5 different types of wetlands: deep water swamps, playa lakes, riparian wetlands, saline and brackish marshes, and freshwater marshes. Our focus today is on freshwater marshes. Freshwater marshes are non-forested, non-tidal wetlands dominated by grasses, sedges, and other freshwater emergent plants. They can occur in low depressional areas in the Gulf Coast region, in shallow water along lakes, rivers, and streams, or they can exist as abandoned oxbows. Freshwater marshes are highly productive ecosystems that can sustain a wide variety of plant communities. Common flora of freshwater marshes include cattails, phragmites, burdock, bulrushes, cordgrass, pennywort, and sedges. From a naturalist point of view, cattails are a wonder of nature where every part of the plant can be used to benefit a variety of species, including humans. These perennials are tall, sturdy plants that can grow to almost 10 feet tall. They have heavy rhizomatous roots, long flat leaves, and long cylindrical brown flower spikes, and will grow anywhere that supplies a constant source of water. Underwater, they provide a safe haven for tiny fish and attract many of the smaller aquatic creatures that birds and other wildlife feed on. They create a shelter from winter cold and wind for mammals and birds, and a source of nesting material with their leaves and seeds. Humans have likewise always benefited from the cattail. The plants have been used for rush-bottom furniture, baskets, and mats. The downy seeds have been used to stuff pillows and mattresses, and during World War II, they were used for life jacket stuffing. Native Americans were experts in using every part of the plant, not only for stuffing or the waterproof qualities of the leaf, but as a reliable food source. All parts of the cattail, from the roots to the flower heads, are edible. The rootstock can be boiled or roasted or dried and ground into a floury powder. The center of the stalk is thick and starchy, and the flower heads can be roasted for a nutty tasting treat. Summer and autumn months are peak seasons for plants flowering in the freshwater wetlands. In the winter, between December and March, these plants are dormant. Late March through early June marks an explosive growing season for wetland plants, which bud and proliferate at this very fertile time. Because freshwater wetlands sustain such a wide variety of plant communities, they also provide diverse habitat for wildlife. Common mammals of the freshwater marsh include nutria, North American river otter, raccoon, swamp cottontail rabbit, coyote, hispid cotton rat, and Virginia opossum. Raccoons are almost exclusively nocturnal and nest in dens. Their dexterous hands and nimble fingers are used to feel the bottoms of streams and ponds for food. They're agile climbers and strong swimmers. Raccoons eat nuts, insects, small rodents, frogs, bird eggs, carrion, and human garbage. Their predators are owls, coyotes, bobcats, and humans. Baby raccoons are born in the fall and are weaned by 3 months. They remain with their mothers for a year and can live up to 15 years. Common reptiles and amphibians of the freshwater marsh include red-eared sliders, Mississippi mud turtle, common snapping turtle, Gulf Coast toad, squirrel tree frog, green tree frog, eastern narrowmouth toad, northern cottonmouth, Gulf Coast ribbon snake, Decay's brown snake, and American alligator. Southern leopard frogs breed year-round at the Bolivar Habitat Preserve. Several hundred eggs are laid in clusters below the water's surface. After 7 to 10 days, newly hatched tadpoles begin growing to 3 times their original size. Between 60 and 90 days, they metamorphose into frogs. They eat mosquitoes and other small invertebrates of freshwater wetlands, like dragonflies. Common fish species of the freshwater wetland include sheepshead minnow and gambusia, or mosquito fish. Sheepshead minnow are an important link in the coastal food chain in the estuary, as many freshwater wetlands can be tidally influenced and connected seasonally to the estuarian system. These fish eat plant materials like algae and are then eaten by red drum, spotted sea trout, turtles, and wading birds. Sheepshead minnow spawn between February and October, when the males construct nest pits in wetland bottoms. Hatching typically occurs during spring and summer. Some anglers use sheepshead minnow as bait, but environmentalists study these fish to determine pollution levels in the wetlands. Bird species of the freshwater marsh are numerous and include white ibis, great egret, green heron, great blue heron, red-winged blackbird, black-bellied whistling duck, common ganonule, osprey, roseate spoonbill, northern shoveler, greater scaup, belted kingfisher, killdeer, American widgeon, ruby-throated hummingbird, cattle egret, snow geese, anhinga, pie-billed grebe, snowy egret, northern pintail, common loon, double-crested cormorant, mottled duck, blue-winged teal, green-winged teal, mallards, least bittern, American bittern, gadwall, American coot, little blue heron, common yellowthroat, swamp sparrow, and more. The black-necked stilt, this guy, mates between April and August and builds its nest of mud, sticks, and shells on the ground near water. Look for a bird with very long pink legs and tuxedo plumage. The stilt eats worms, mollusks, shrimp, insects, small fish, and floating seeds. Its predators are gulls, skunks, coyotes, and other larger birds. Because it summers on the Gulf Coast, stilts are seen in the wetlands only during mating season. The white ibis has narrow, slender toes that help it walk on the mud and silt without sinking. Its bill's long and down-curved and can easily probe in holes and crevices in the mud for crabs and crayfish. These birds are valuable to the wetland environment, and then they consume crayfish, which in turn are known to consume large numbers of fish if not checked. Ibises begin their fall migration south to Texas in mid-September and begin their spring migration in May. These beautiful birds fly in formation to their roosts and generally nest in huge colonies around freshwater marshes in the company of herons, egrets, anhingas, and other large wetland fowl. Ibises build low-lying, bulky nests of twigs, branches, and moss and lay their eggs. In only 3 weeks, the chicks will hatch with full grayish down. It takes about 2 years before their feathers become brilliantly white like their parents. Having explored the flora and fauna of freshwater wetland ecosystems, let's turn now to its functions and value. Wetlands are more important than you might imagine. They're one of Texas's most valuable national treasures. Wetlands improve water quality. They absorb and filter sediment, nutrients, and other natural material and man-made pollutants that would otherwise damage rivers, lakes, and streams. Wetlands support the food web. Because wetlands trap and hold nutrients, they increase the food supply all the way up the food chain, from aquatic invertebrates and shellfish to forage fish and larger predatory fish, to birds, mammals, and people. Wetlands provide habitat. They provide both temporary and permanent homes for thousands of species of fish, mollusks, birds, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and insects. These animals, in turn, provide us with clues about the health of the ecosystem and its water quality. Wetlands reduce pollution. Wetlands trap oil, nitrogen, phosphorus, sewage, and other pollutants. Because wetlands naturally help break down and absorb pollutants in the water, wetlands save cities and towns up to $1.6 billion a year in cleanup costs to water supplies. Wetlands also control erosion. Sediment settling in rivers and streams can kill aquatic animals and damage habitats. They can also clog waterways, creating problems for boats and barges trying to navigate through the water. Wetland vegetation helps maintain a natural and healthy shoreline. Wetlands recharge groundwater. In many parts of Texas, water is stored naturally underground and is called groundwater. Water may be held in the tiny spaces between the soil particles or in large underground caverns. Many areas of Texas depend on groundwater for drinking and irrigation. Wetlands help water seep into these underground reservoirs. Wetlands reduce flood damage. During a flood, the force of the water flowing through an area often causes more damage than rain and wind combined. Wetland plants help stem the flow, reducing erosion and over time slowly releasing floodwater into rivers, streams, and underground aquifers in the atmosphere. Protecting the wetlands saves up to $30 billion a year in flood-related repair costs in the United States alone. Wetlands help create jobs and products. Many of the natural products we buy or sell, from fish, shrimp, and trees to crops, like rice, depend on wetlands too. Wetland-related businesses generate hundreds of millions of dollars each year. In 1992 alone, the wetland-dependent shrimp harvest had a dockside value of $145 million. Wetlands provide fun and relaxation. Texas is known around the world for great hunting and fishing. Without healthy wetland habitats, the fish, birds, and game would simply not be there. Wetlands are also enjoyed by millions of photographers, boaters, hikers, and wildlife watchers who enjoy the natural beauty that wetlands provide. Despite all these benefits and functions of freshwater wetlands, Texas has lost more than half of its wetlands in the past 200 years. The loss is primarily associated with the conversion to uplands for suburban and urban development and agricultural purposes. Texas wetlands have been drained, filled, used as dumps, and generally misunderstood. In the past, people who drained and filled wetlands felt they were reclaiming the land for more useful purposes, such as cropland or pastures, roads, homes, and businesses, waterways, canals, and reservoirs. Although most Texans recognize the danger of toxic chemicals being dumped in our waterways, few realize that when it rains, water running off city streets, fertilized lawns, landfills, and some agricultural fields can contain high levels of chemicals that damage many wetland plants and animals. In addition, when plants are removed from the sides of rivers, lakes, or streams by overgrazing or development, soils easily wash into the water, covering up aquatic habitats and destroying many plants and animals. Damage from extreme weather events, like hurricanes, also threatens freshwater wetlands. For these reasons, loss of freshwater wetland habitat continues and is of great concern. Habitat preservation projects are needed to slow down the loss of freshwater wetlands in the lower Galveston Bay watershed. Since 1992, the greater Houston metropolitan area has lost at least 5.5% of its natural freshwater wetlands. Although a 5% loss in 20 years is unsustainable by any accounting, some areas have experienced loss at rates that are catastrophic. For example, Harris County lost almost 30% of its freshwater wetlands, including most prominently the iconic prairie pothole pimple mound complexes, shown here. The 8-county Houston area is one of the fastest growing in the country. Metropolitan growth means development, which means the loss of wetlands. When wetlands are lost, with them go important ecological services for both nature and people. Until recently, we haven't had a clear picture of just how many acres of wetlands we might be losing. Overall, recent analysis reveals that development is seriously affecting the freshwater wetland resources in the greater Houston metro area. These freshwater wetlands are the headwaters for virtually all of the water bodies feeding into Galveston Bay. Continued loss at the rates documented here will very likely have grave implications for the long-term health of the Galveston Bay ecosystem because it's losing the principal means of cleaning the polluted runoff that enters the bay. This is a projection of the urban growth projected for 2035. Since the 1970s, the federal government has supported wetland protection and restoration. In Texas, agencies such as Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the General Land Office implement wetland conservation programs and partnerships. TPWD's State Wetlands Conservation Plan encourages and supports landowners who want to protect and restore wetlands on their property. There are also a lot of things you and your students can do as individuals to support the health of our freshwater wetlands. Number 1, look for wetlands in your community and when you travel. Learn all you can about wetlands and the plants and animals that inhabit them. Number 2, use native plants when landscaping homes and businesses. Native plants usually require less water, pesticides, and fertilizers. Number 3, save more water for wetlands by fixing leaky faucets, using appliances and fixtures that use less water, and not overwatering your yard. Number 4, pick up your litter and dispose of it in appropriate trash containers. Also, keep surfaces that wash into storm drains clean of pet feces, toxic chemicals, fertilizers, and motor oil, which eventually wash into our wetlands, polluting them. Number 5, use living shoreline techniques to stabilize the soil. If you make use of waterfront property with a shoreline or riverbank, use living shorelines to stabilize the soil. That's a mix of plant roots, sand, and stone instead of man-made structures. Number 6, avoid wetlands if you're planning to expand your home or install a shed. Number 7, use phosphate-free laundry and dishwasher detergents. Phosphates help algae grow, which can suffocate aquatic life. Number 8, use paper and recycled products made from unbleached paper. Bleached paper contains toxic chemicals that can contaminate water. Number 9, use non-toxic products for household cleaning. Never spray lawn or garden chemicals on a windy or rainy day, as they'll wash into the waterways. And number 10, of course, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Working with conservation organizations is another great way to protect our wetlands. By now, you're already familiar with the conservation work that Artist Boat does on the Coastal Heritage Preserve. But there are other local and national organizations working toward wetland protection as well. Number 1, the Galveston Bay Foundation works to protect vital natural resources and ensures that the Galveston Bay remains a healthy and productive place today and for future generations. For education resources and information, visit galvbay.org. Number 2, Houston Wilderness. They work with businesses, environmental, and government interests to protect and promote the 10 diverse ecoregions of the 13-county Houston area, including coastal prairies, forests, wetlands, and waterways. If you want to learn more about our local ecosystems, go to houstonwilderness.org. Number 3, Citizens Environmental Coalition. Here you can find resources for teaching about coastal marshes in your learning environment. Go to hereinhouston.org/marshes. Number 4, the United States Environmental Protection Agency. They promote and protect human health and the environment, providing clean and safe air, water, and land for all Americans. For educational resources about wetlands, including lesson plans from the EPA, go to epa.gov/wetlands. And number 5, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA's mission is to conserve and manage coastal and marine ecosystems and resources. NOAA is dedicated to understanding and stewardship of the environment. For educational resources about wetlands from NOAA, visit oceanservice.noaa.gov/education. Well, that brings us to the end of your intro to wetlands. I hope it was helpful. Thanks for joining me.